A 12-year-old girl walked out of a county auction with a piece of land nobody wanted, signed over as a joke by the man who owned it. 23 years later, that same man needed her permission to run a $4.2 million pipeline, and she hadn't sold a single inch. The lawyer called at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning. His name was Pryor, and he did not say hello. He said, "The project is frozen. 47 crews were idle. $4.2 million in excavation equipment sat in a field in Harlan County, Kentucky, not moving. A pipeline easement that should have taken 3 weeks to clear had been stuck for 11 months. The company had permits, they had surveys, they had engineers and environmental clearances, and a county commissioner who owed Emmett Calloway 2 favors. What they did not have was Della's signature." Pryor said her name like it tasted wrong. Della Vance, 31 years old, owner of a 12-foot strip of gravel and packed dirt in the middle of nowhere. She would not sell. She would not negotiate. She would not return the lawyer's calls. Pryor paced outside a glass building in Lexington and said, "She's nobody. She's a farm girl from Harlan County." He was not wrong about where she was from. He was wrong about everything else. Harlan County, Kentucky, October, 23 years ago. The auction was held on a Saturday with folding tables and a coffee pot nobody had washed since August. There were 61 people, give or take. Most of them were there for the tractor parts. A few were there because word had gotten around that the old Hatch gravel operation was on the block, and word had also gotten around that buying it was a waste of money. Emmett Calloway had seen to that. He was 47 years old, with the kind of wide handshake and louder than necessary laugh that told people he owned the room before he said a word. He controlled 3 properties that wrapped around the access road to the gravel operation. He had blocked 2 buyers in the last 4 years, quietly, legally, with a county encroachment notice that went nowhere but cost enough time and money that both buyers had walked. He didn't want the gravel operation. He just didn't want anyone else to have it. The bidding opened at $800. Nobody moved. Calloway let it sit. 10 seconds. 15. He looked around the crowd with the patient confidence of someone who already knows how the room ends. Then he walked to the table and bought it himself. $800 for 12 acres of worked-out gravel pits, a rusted equipment shed, and what the county listing called a vehicle storage area. He handed the money over the way someone tips a valet, like the transaction was beneath him. Then he turned around. Della was standing at the back of the crowd with her grandfather, Warren. She was 12 years old, 4'9", and she had been to this auction before. She had been to the one before that, too. Calloway had seen Warren at both of them. He walked over. He crouched down so he was eye level with Della. It was the kind of crouching adults do when they want to seem kind, but are actually performing. He held out the deed transfer slip. "You want it?" he said. "Take it. Put it on your wall." 3 people laughed. One of them laughed loud. Warren started to speak. Della put her hand on his arm. She looked at Calloway for 3 seconds. Not nervous, not grateful, just looking. Then she took the paper. Calloway signed it on the hood of his truck with a pen from his shirt pocket. His assistant witnessed it. The county notary was standing 8 feet away and stamped it because that was his job, and the slip was legal, and there was no reason not to. Calloway handed Della the receipt. He was already smiling at someone across the crowd. Della folded the receipt in half. She pressed the fold with her thumb. She slid it into the front pocket of Warren's gray jacket, the one he wore every time he left the house. Nobody was watching her anymore. Calloway was telling a story by the coffee pot. The words gravel and joke and little girl were in it somewhere. More laughter. Warren drove Della home in silence for the first 11 minutes. Then he said, "You know what you just did?" She said, "Yes." He didn't ask more. She didn't explain. That night, she sat at the kitchen table with a blue spiral notebook open to the first page. The table had a ring stain from Warren's coffee cup in the top left corner. It had been there for years. She wrote down 3 document numbers from memory. Then she wrote down one date, October 1956. Then she closed the notebook. The folded receipt sat on the table beside her. She had spent 6 months in the county library before that auction. She had read zoning records and county plat maps and old road commission filings that nobody had touched in decades. She had followed a paper trail backward through 63 years of records, 1 page at a time, in a reading room that smelled like dust and old carpet. She had found something. She hadn't told anyone what it was. Not Warren. Not anyone. Calloway thought he had given a child a worthless piece of paper and gotten a laugh out of it. He had no idea what he had actually done. Della turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. The notebook stayed on the table. The receipt stayed folded inside it. And somewhere in the Harlan County Clerk's records, untouched and unread, a 1956 plat document sat exactly where it had always been, waiting for someone who knew to look. Hit subscribe and don't go anywhere, because the piece of paper Della found in that library is about to make Calloway's lawyers sweat through their suits. November, Harlan County Public Library. 2 years before the auction. A blue spiral notebook. Blank. Still in the plastic. Della set it on the reading room table next to a stack of county plat maps and opened to the first page. She was 10 years old. Her grandmother had died the previous spring and left behind 3 cardboard boxes of county records, deed transfers, water district surveys, old road commission filings, collected the way some people collect newspaper clippings. No explanation, no system, just a woman who thought county paperwork was interesting and a library that was warm. Della went through all 3 boxes that winter. She wasn't looking for anything specific. She found it anyway. The document was in the second box, folded between a 1961 property tax roll and a water district survey from 1978. It was a county plat filed in October 1956, labeled Road Extension 7C. It showed a proposed county road running through the middle of what was then called the Hatch Gravel Operation, and it was designated as a permanent public easement by county order. A handwritten note in the margin said, "Construction postponed indefinitely. Budget reallocated, November 1959. Della read that line 3 times. She wrote one word in the notebook, postponed. Then she wrote the document number underneath it. She did not know yet what she had found. She knew she had found something. Those 2 things are not the same. She spent the next 4 months learning the difference between postponed and canceled. A public easement is a right the public holds to use a piece of land, a road, a path, a corridor. Once a county creates one by official order, it stays on the books until the county votes to remove it. That vote has a name. It is called a vacation. It requires a commissioner meeting, a published notice in the local paper, and a recorded order filed with the clerk. Della found the 1956 easement order. She searched for the vacation order. She went through 63 years of county commissioner meeting records. She went through all of them. She found nothing. Road Extension 7C had never been vacated, which meant the easement was still alive, which meant the public right-of-way through the middle of the Hatch Gravel Operation had existed, quietly, on the county books, for 63 years without anyone noticing. And Emmett Calloway's encroachment notice, the one that had scared off 2 buyers in 4 years, was built on the claim that the access road belonged to him. It did not belong to him. It had never belonged to him. It was a public easement. He had been lying. Maybe not on purpose. Maybe he didn't know. But the legal effect was the same either way. Della wrote, "Encroachment claim is void." She put a box around it. Then she started on the 1978 Water District Survey. Warren was at the kitchen table when she came home. The kettle was on the stove. The ring stain from his coffee cup was in the same corner it had always been. She spread the hand-drawn map across the table. It was a copy she had made on the library's photocopier for 15 cents. It showed the gravel operation, the proposed road corridor, and the aquifer zone boundary from the water survey. Warren looked at it. His wife, Della's grandmother, had always said Warren understood land better than he let on. He just didn't talk much about it. He said, "What am I looking at?" She said, "The gravel pits sit on top of a water recharge zone. The county flagged it in 1978. He said, "For what?" She said, "Future well permits. If the county ever expands." Warren looked at the map for a long time. He said, "Somebody going to want that?" She said, "Somebody already is." She pointed to 3 parcels on the map. She had found them in deed transfer records over the past 6 weeks. 3 separate purchases, all filed under different LLC names, all in the last 14 months, all surrounding the gravel operation on 3 sides. Warren set down his coffee cup. "Same cup, chipped rim, white ceramic," he said. "How long have you been doing this?" She said, "A while." He didn't ask more. She spent the following months watching. Not walking on the land, just watching. She drove past the gravel operation twice a month. She wrote down what she saw. Survey flags appeared in March, then disappeared in May. Fresh tire tracks in the mud near the northwest corner. A truck she didn't recognize parked on the county road for 40 minutes on a Thursday afternoon. She tracked the LLC purchases in the notebook. Each new deed got its own page. She noted the filing date, the acreage, the price paid, and the registered agent name. All 3 LLCs had the same registered agent. She wrote the name at the top of a new page, underlined it, and drew a line connecting it to a name she had circled 6 pages earlier. Emmett Calloway. He was assembling something. Parcel by parcel, he was building a block of land. 280 acres on 3 sides of the gravel operation. And he was doing it quietly, which meant he didn't want anyone to know what the center was worth yet. But he needed the center. You cannot run a pipeline, or a water line, or a utility corridor, or an access road for a development through 280 acres of land if a 12-foot strip through the middle belongs to someone else. The gravel operation was not the prize. The gravel operation was the lock. Della closed the notebook. She looked at the hand-drawn map one more time. Then she turned off the kitchen light and left the map on the table. The kettle had gone cold. The trap was already set. $312,000. The man on the porch said it like he was doing Della a favor. He was young, maybe 28, with clean boots and a clipboard, and the practiced smile of someone who had been told he was good at this. His name was Tate. He said he represented a land acquisitions group and that his client was prepared to pay $312,000 for the full parcel. Clear title, quick close, no contingencies. Della was 22 years old. She looked at him the same way she had looked at Calloway on that folding table Saturday a decade earlier. She said, "No thank you." Tate blinked. He said, "Ma'am, that is a fair offer." She said, "I'm sure it is." She thanked him and closed the door. Inside, her husband Jonah was at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the look of a man who had learned not to ask questions he already knew the answer to. He said, "Same group?" She said, "Same agent." He nodded once and went back to his coffee. They had been married for 3 years. Jonah was a quiet man who trusted Della the way some people trust weather. Not because they understood it, but because they had learned it was almost always right. He had never asked her to explain the notebook. He had never asked her to sell. The second offer came by phone, 11 months later. A county land acquisitions officer named Breck called on a Thursday morning and said the county was exploring options for a utility corridor easement through the parcel and was prepared to offer $82,000 for a permanent right-of-way. Della was standing at the kitchen counter when he called. She said, "I'll have to decline." Breck said, "This is county business, Ms. Vance." She said, "I understand. Thank you for calling." She hung up. Breck filed a report that week. It noted that the property owner had declined without explanation, and that legal counsel should review the easement options before the county proceeded. The county's legal counsel reviewed the 1956 plat. They called Breck the next day. Breck didn't call Della again. The gravel operation sat quiet. Della mowed the strip twice a year, once in June, once in September. She paid the annual property tax, which had never once risen above $214, every March without fail. She kept the corner markers clear. She kept the receipts. The notebook filled up slowly. Offer dates, dollar amounts, names, document numbers. She had started a second notebook by then. Same blue cover, same spiral binding. Jonah had bought it for her birthday without being asked. Their daughter Nadia was born in the middle of the 3rd year of waiting. She was a quiet baby. She watched things. One afternoon when Nadia was about 4, she pointed at the hand-drawn map on the kitchen wall, the photocopy from the library, still taped in the same spot, and said, "What's that?" Della said, "That's ours." Nadia said, "The whole thing?" Della said, "The part that matters." It was not the kind of answer a 4-year-old understood. It was the kind of answer that stays. Across town, things were not quiet. Emmett Calloway's LLC had burned through 2 project timelines and 1 construction loan extension. The pipeline permit was approved. The survey was done. The engineers had signed off. The county commissioner had signed off. Everything was ready, except for 180 feet of land in the middle of it. His lawyer, A man named Fenn, who wore three-piece suits and carried a leather briefcase and charged $400 an hour, had advised Calloway that the owner would eventually fold. "Everyone folds," Fenn said. "Nobody holds out forever on a piece of land worth nothing." Calloway had believed him, for a while. The third offer arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in October. Fenn came himself. He drove a gray sedan and carried the briefcase, and said nothing when Della opened the door, just raised his eyebrows slightly. The look of a man who had expected someone older. She let him in. He sat at the kitchen table. She poured him coffee. He set the briefcase on the floor beside his chair. He said, "My client is prepared to offer $900,000 for the parcel. Full market value, plus a 20% premium. Cash, 30-day close." Della sat across from him. She said no. Fenn said, "Ms. Vance, I'd encourage you to think carefully." She said, "I have been." He said, "My client has significant resources." She said, "I know." Fenn looked at her. He picked up his coffee. He set it down. He said, "Is there a number?" She said, "Not for a sale." He said, "Then what would it take?" She said, "That's not today's conversation." Fenn closed the briefcase and left. Jonah was on the porch when she came outside. He said, 900? She said, "Yes." He said, "You okay?" She said, "Fine." She went back inside. She opened the second notebook. She wrote down the date, the amount, and Fenn's name. Then she wrote one more line underneath it. He asked if there was a number. There isn't. There's a terms. The call came on a quiet morning the following March. Della was at the kitchen table with her coffee. The phone buzzed. Unknown number, Kentucky area code. She looked at it. She picked it up on the third ring. Fenn didn't say hello. He said, "My client is prepared to discuss alternative arrangements." Della said, "I'll need my daughter on the call." Nadia was 24 by then, 2 years out of law school, and she drove down from Lexington that Friday with a box of files and a yellow legal pad and the focused expression of someone who had been waiting for this call almost as long as her mother had. She spread everything across the kitchen table: the original deed, the 1956 plat, the canceled road extension, 63 years of tax receipts for the parcel, every single one, filed in sequence, the county's own record of continued assessment and ownership, unbroken, the Water District Survey from 1978, the industrial water permit application. Nadia had helped file 6 weeks earlier. She read in silence for 11 minutes, then she looked up. She said, "Mom, they have nothing." Della said, "I know," Nadia said. "They filed an abandonment claim." Della said, "I know that too." Nadia picked up her phone and called Fenn back. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in the Harlan County Courthouse. The room had 12 chairs, a clerk's table, and fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency that made Fenn's assistant visibly uncomfortable. Calloway sat on one side. He had not looked at Della when he walked in. Della sat on the other side with Nadia and Jonah. Nadia wore a gray blazer. She carried one folder. Fenn opened by citing 3 county statutes on property abandonment. He argued that the parcel had never been developed, never been improved, never been put to commercial use. He argued that 12 years of non-use constituted constructive abandonment under Harlan County precedent. He spoke for 9 minutes. Nadia placed 3 documents on the table. She did not stand up. She stayed seated. She said, "The county assessor has billed this parcel every single year for 63 years. The tax records are in evidence. If the county believed it was abandoned, they would have stopped taxing it. They did not stop taxing it. They taxed it last March. The owner paid in full. She has paid in full every single year since she took ownership." She slid the stack of receipts across the table. 63 pages. 1 per year. She said, "The abandonment claim has no legal basis." The hearing officer looked at Fenn. Fenn looked at Calloway. Calloway was looking at the table. The hearing officer said, "Ruling for the respondent. Abandonment claim dismissed. Total time, 41 seconds. Fenn reached for his phone before the ruling was finished. The negotiation took 9 days. Fenn called twice a day for the first 3 days. Nadia answered. She was polite, she was brief, she was immovable. The terms Della wanted were not complicated. No sale. A permanent surface use and pipeline easement, 180 feet wide, crossing the full 12-foot strip, granted for 20 years with automatic renewal. a monthly easement payment of $3,100, adjusted for inflation every 5 years, transferable to Della's heirs in perpetuity, and a royalty of 4% on any water extraction from the aquifer recharge zone beneath the parcel, beginning the day the first permit was activated. Fenn pushed back on the royalty clause. Nadia said, "It stays." He pushed back on the inflation adjustment. She said, "It stays." He said, "My client feels the monthly figure is above market." She said, "Your client needed this strip 3 years ago. He's had 9 days to find another route. Has he found one?" Silence. She said the terms stay. Calloway signed on a Wednesday. He used his own pen. He did not look up from the paper. Nadia called Della from the parking lot outside Fenn's office. She said, "It's done." Della said, "All terms?" Nadia said, "Everyone." Della said, "Good." She hung up. Jonah was in the kitchen. He heard the call end. He didn't ask. He put the kettle on. The recording was filed at the Harlan County Clerk's office at 9:22 on a Thursday morning. Della drove herself. She parked the truck, walked in, handed the folder to the clerk, and waited while it was stamped. The clerk handed her the copy. She walked back to the truck. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment. She opened the second blue notebook, the one Jonah had given her, and turned to the last page with writing on it. She wrote 4 words: filed, recorded, 3,100. She closed the notebook. 3 weeks later, a small item ran in the Harlan County Courier. Pipeline easement agreement finalized in Eastern County Corridor. 1 paragraph. No names on the payment terms. Calloway read it over breakfast. He set the paper down. He said nothing. 2 of the men who had laughed at the auction in 2001 saw the item. One of them called the other. Neither of them laughed this time. Mrs. Soto, who had staffed the library reading room for 30 years and watched a 10-year-old girl carry county plat maps to a table in the corner, cut the item out and pinned it to the bulletin board near the periodicals. She did not write a note on it. She didn't need to. Some men collect land. Della collected patience, and she got paid $3,100 a month for the rest of her life to prove it. Here's the question. If Fenn had walked in with a lump sum of $900,000 instead of monthly terms, would you have taken the cash or held out for the monthly deal like Della did? Drop your answer in the comments. This story is done, but the next one might be sitting right in your county records right now.